some of the services that international banks provide. They mainly facilitate with imports and exports of their clients by arranging trade financing. They also do, they arrange for foreign exchange necessary to do cross-border transactions, and they offer hedging services. Some of the major factors that distinguish them from domestic banks is that they both borrow and lend in the euro currency market, and then international banks are usually members of international loan syndicates which participate with other international banks to lend large sums to multinational corporations needing project financing. And then this is just a list of the world's 10 largest banks, as you can see, spread out, so one from Germany, two from the United States. And then, next slide. And then some of the reasons that banks from domestic they go international is the transaction cost. Multinational banks may be able to circumvent government currency controls, which we'll see with the different type of offices they open up in different type of branches. And then growth and risk reduction obviously happens if you're able to expand your bank internationally. And then prestige is something big for high net worth clients and whatnot. Having a large bank internationally can help that. And then regulatory advantages, as we'll talk about within the different branches and offices that banks open up. So some of the types, the first one is a correspondent bank, which basically they maintain a correspondent bank account with another bank in a different country. So this allows clients who are multinational corporations, if they're doing business in a different country and they don't have an office there, they'll have a correspondent bank that can help deal with some of their needs in the correspondence. And then that enables some of the advantages and disadvantages. It's low cost. You obviously don't have to open up a branch or an office there. But some of the disadvantages is they might not provide the same service as you. So one of the ways to circumvent that is to open up a representative office, which is just a small service facility that helps the MNCs deal with some of the compliance. And then another one is the foreign bank branch, which operates like a local branch, but is legally part of the parent. So it's subject to the banking regulations of the home country and the foreign country, and it can provide a much fuller range of services than just a correspondence bank. This is an example right here, is a branch bank loan. Limits are based on the capital of the parent bank, not the branch bank, so that's one of the advantages that they could have over a local bank. They might be able to offer more money on loan. And that's one of the most popular ways U.S. banks expand overseas. And then some more types is a subsidiary bank, which is locally incorporated, wholly or partly owned by a foreign parent, and then an affiliate bank, which is one of the partly owned but not controlled by the parent. So U.S. parent banks like foreign subsidiaries because they allow U.S. banks to underwrite securities, which is a huge advantage. And then another type is EDGE Act banks, which are federally chartered subsidiaries of U.S. banks that are physically located in the United States but are allowed to engage in a full range of international bank activities. You can see some of the advantages of this, which EDGE Act banks they're not prohibited from owning equity in business corporations, unlike domestic banks. So that's so through the EDGE Act banks, the U.S. parent banks can own foreign banking subsidiaries, which is obviously a huge advantage. And then there's offshore banking centers, which is countries' banking system is organized to permit external accounts beyond the normal scope. So some of the features that make a country attractive for this is is total freedom from host-country governmental banking regulations, so trying to get rid of some of those regulations. So some examples that would make them attractive is low reserve requirements, no deposit insurance, and low taxes would make a country liable for offshoring. And then the international bank is a separate set of accounts that are segregated onto the parent's books.
All the international banks participate in what is the international money market. And the international money market is based on the euro currency. The euro isn't referring to the actual euro, it's just what is put before, for example, if you're putting dollars into a bank in Europe or in a different country, it's called a euro dollar. If if a Japanese bank is putting money into a different country, it's called a euro yen. It's not the actual euro. It's a completely external system that works parallel with the domestic system. Any bank that participates in it is called a euro bank. And what they do is when banks have surplus of funds, they'll sell off their funds to other banks through these interbid rates. And these interbid rates are set from country to country by by the government or by, for example, in London, it's set by the it's coming up. But so what they do is that they'll trade these basically massive amounts of currency in the millions, trying to keep spreads that will give themselves the advantage to make money. And moving on to the BBA, that is the British Bankers Association. So what they do is every day they meet and they control this, the LIBOR, which is the London Interbank Offered Rate. And so all these banks in London are trying to trade these currencies on these, throughout these interbid rates. And what the BBA does is they set the rate every single day. And this is across all currencies and for 15 different maturities. And so what these banks are then doing are either trading at these rates from bank to bank, or they're taking these bank rates from other banks and then selling them to corporations for more or for less based on the corporation's credit. So they're dealing with, the British Bankers Association is dealing with 350 trillion worth of financial instruments in the world, in their country and whatnot. And so if they move this interbank rate by 1 basis point, it's equal to 35 billion. So what's happened in the past, the panel banks distress, is all these banks that are on this panel that are moving and fixing this rate have been found to be distrusted, because what they do is they can move these rates by 1 basis point, maybe 2 basis points, and what it does is it doesn't trigger the market that the market is going down or the market's going up, but because it's such a big difference, 35 billion, they're able to make smaller, or able to make like amounts of money within it. It's basically like inside trading. On to Euro credits, which is a shorter to medium term of money. And so what these banks will do is they come together and they create syndicates, which is, so they have these loans that are so large that one bank can't handle it by themselves. They come together to try to spread the risk, both the credit and the deposit risk. And so because these loans are so massive and they're giving them to corporations and they're giving them to sovereign governments that has such a high credit risk as to whether or not the governments can pay back, whether or not the corporations can pay back, or the national organizations, what they'll do is they'll have what is called, they'll have the LIBOR, which is the London bank rate, and then plus the X. And what the X is a percentage of interest rate that they use to compensate for that credit risk. And so based on the credit of the corporations, the governments, or whoever they're loaning these huge loans out to, that X, that extra factor, will be a higher or lower interest rate. And why they do this is that the high credit risk rates, for example, if you're a US company, if you're going to pay the US bank rate, it's going to be higher than if you have your money in England paying the LIBOR rate plus adding on the interest rate. The forward rate agreements, it's an interbank contract between Euro banks that allows to hedge interest rate risks, and mismatched deposits and credits. So what happens is from these Euro credits, these corporations will want to have, they'll have these maturity rates of anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and they'll want them to roll over and keep rolling over underneath the same people that they borrowed the money from. And they want the same rates, but what they do is at the end of each maturity, they update the rates, they update the interest rates, the interbank rates, and then continue on to another maturity. And what happens is that then over a period of time, the deposit maturities and the credit maturities can become disaligned. And so that's what the forward rate agreement comes into, is because if the deposit maturities are longer than the credit maturities, and the interest rate falls, then the credit rates will be adjusted downwards, and therefore the banks that are loaning the money is still paying a higher rate. And on the opposite side, if the deposit of the maturities are shorter than the credit maturities, and the interest rates rise, then the deposit rates are gonna be adjusted, and then the bank that is again loaning out the money will have the lower rate on the credits. And so what they do is they create these forward rate agreements where the buyer agrees to pay the seller the increased interest cost if the rates do fall below the previously agreed rate. And then the seller, the banks, agree to pay the buyer the increased interest cost if the rates do go above the agreed previous rate. On the Euro notes, another type of money that's lent out is, these are more short term, they're 3 to 6 months. And groups of investment banks and commercial banks come together to make a facility. And what these facilities do is they underwrite these notes, and they give money to these client borrowers who agree to issue the same Euro notes underneath the lenders' names. These contracts are usually together for about 10 years, and so why this is attractive to borrowers is because what they do is they buy all these Euro notes at present, but they buy them for discounted prices, but they have to pay off the Euro note in full by the end of the maturity. It's attractive to borrowers because they can get the Euro notes for cheaper, and the banks seek to do this because they can then get the interest return over the long run on maturities. Euro commercial paper is like a short-term promissory note. It is 1 to 6 months. It's similar to the Euro notes where they're discounted at face value, but it's closer to like paper money. Most of the Euro commercial paper within the world is denominated into the Euro in the US because it's a stronger currency, and but the US Euro commercial market is different than the Euro commercial market. The Euro has twice as long maturities, but it isn't as strong, but it gives, because it's longer, it gives more chance for higher yields, which is more attractive for people trying to get into that market. And then the US commercial paper is short-term yields, but it is a stronger market. Therefore, there's a market that's underneath the first one. There's a secondary market for selling those off.
And then finally we have the international debt crisis, and it's also known as the third world debt crisis. And in the 1980s, Mexico asked banks to forgive $68 billion in loans, and then soon many other less developed countries announced that they had similar problems. The dominant supplier of oil at the time, OPEC, was somewhat blamed for this crisis. They raised prices dramatically multiple times. And since OPEC had so much currency in euro banks, it created what is called a petrodollar recycling, where banks would lend out money in order to make money on interest, but the people who they're lending them to would just end up using it to buy oil. And then oil prices were raised again during high inflation and high unemployment, and this helped contribute to the problem. Debt to equity swaps. It was a debt to equity swaps or a debt rescheduling agreement. Creditor banks would sell their loans for US dollars at discounts from face value to multinational corporations wanting to make equity investments in subsidiaries or local firms such as LDCs. An LDC would buy the bank debt from a multinational corporation at an even lower discount, but in local currency. And then the MNC would use the currency to make a new investment in the LDC that would be beneficial. And then we have the Brady bonds, which was seen as the solution for the debt crisis. And they offered creditor banks 3 alternatives. And the first one was convert their loans to marketable bonds with face value equal to 65% of the original loan amount. Or number 2 was convert the loans to collateralized bonds with a reduced interest rate of 6.5%. And the third, which was the most popular, was to lend additional funds to allow debtor nations to get on their feet. And then we have the global financial crisis, the most recent one, which started in 2007. credit crunch. It was the inability of borrowers to obtain credit. There were three factors, which were liberalization of banking and securities regulation, global savings glut, and the low interest rates. The liberalization of banking and securities regulation was the separation of commercial banking and financial services, the global savings glut, which we already discussed in class, and the low interest rates. So the bankers lured first-time home buyers into getting mortgages with these low rates, and when the rates ended up shooting up, people couldn't afford their mortgages anymore. Many banks held debt indirectly through SIVs and CDOs, and when subprime debtors began defaulting on the loans, we all kind of know what happens after that. And then impact of the financial crisis was in the financial service industry. Northern Rock, the British Bank, was nationalized as a result of the liquidity crisis. Bear Stearns was sold to JP Morgan for $1.2 billion. Bank of America acquired Merrill Lynch after CDO losses. Lehman Brothers ended up failing. AIG was rescued by the Fed, a $182 billion bailout. Wachovia acquired Wells Fargo. Citigroup was rescued by the Treasury. And for the housing and unemployment, in 2008, 9% of mortgages were at least a month late or already in a state of foreclosure. The house prices by 2008 were already down 20%. The auto industry, auto sales plummeted, especially when the gas prices went up to around $4. People couldn't afford to fill up their tanks and were driving these big SUVs. And then GM filed for bankruptcy, General Motors, in a $49.5 billion bailout from the Treasury. And in the financial markets, stocks fell to unimaginable levels. And then the aftermath of this is that it's still ongoing. We're still kind of recovering. And now we have a high regulation on banking. Obama signed a Consumer Protection Act where the government has power over financial markets for the first time since the Great Depression. And the FDIC can seize and break up big banks, which eliminates the too big to fail concept. And that's what it is.
So what I'll do, give me 2 minutes. I mean, do you guys have time? Just give me 2 minutes. So in the early 80s, when the central bank stopped pegging interest rates and they let interest rates and currencies float, the banks had to come up with the floating rate agreements and the floating rate notes to be able to match the assets and the liabilities so that they were hedging off the interest rate rates. This is the way I looked at it. If you want to understand how the financial crisis worked, just look at the bank balance sheets. So on the asset side, we have U.S. Treasury securities, municipals, residential mortgage-backed securities, commercial mortgage-backed securities, personal and business loans on short, medium term. We have mortgage loans and real estate on the long term. On the liability side, they have bonds, they have commercial paper, deposits, CDs, and other medium-term bonds. We have long-term bonds, others equity, and retained earnings. So let's go through the math really quick. So during the financial crisis, we found out that Wall Street was basically underwriting crap securities, RMBS and CMBS and SIVs and CDOs that were sitting on these balance sheets were basically worthless. So when the value of your securities on the asset side of your balance sheet go down, what happens to the total assets? They go down. Do your liabilities change? Nope. So where does it hit? When there's equity. When the bond business and the personal business loans and the mortgage loans start to default, the values go down, what happens to your assets? Down. What happens to your retained earnings and owner's equity? Gone. When the real estate values are dropping, what happens to your assets? Down. Owner's equity. Out. They swapped out a lot of these securities for U.S. Treasuries to stabilize the assets. Then what they did was, since these didn't really change, what they did was they issued convertible preferred securities, which is considered equity, to prop up the equity ratios to keep the banks solvent so that the banks didn't look insolvent to the public and create a banking crisis and a run on the banks. So by basically swapping out these securities for treasuries to create convertible convertible preferreds to basically recapitalize the banks, stabilize the assets and the liabilities on the balance sheet, and they went back to FASB and said, can we go back and hold our loans at cost and not mark to market, and our securities at cost and not mark to market to basically mitigate the downward shift in the asset values, which is basically causing insolvency in the banking system. And the Federal Reserve, along with the Treasury, came in, restructured the bank balance sheets, and basically saved the system from totally collapsing. And the system collapsed in Spain, in Iceland, and other areas, even though they had the European central banks that bailed them out. There was a lot of runs on the banks in those countries, but the worst that could have happened didn't happen, and it didn't happen here. It cost us about $5 to $10 trillion to basically bail out the whole system. And from my calculations, it's probably around 20 to 30 trillion over a 20 to 30 year period was the total cost of the financial crisis. Okay, that's it. And then I'm gonna take pictures of this, please. And then don't forget to go through the deliverables, go through the in-class exam, clean up all of your stuff.